They had always called it a rumor, because calling it a warning would have required action. Across the settled galaxy, the idea circulated in guarded conversations and classified briefings that humanity, quiet and fractured on the surface, hid something beneath its politics and trade fleets. Something precise. Something terrifying. Most dismissed it as paranoia born from humanity's strange history of surviving disasters that should have erased them. Empires preferred simple enemies, and humans appeared weak enough to conquer without consequence. Elias Rowe knew better, though even he had once hoped the rumor was untrue. He stood alone in the observation chamber beneath Earth's mantle, watching a projection of the outer colonies burn. The Varkesh Dominion's invasion had been swift and efficient, following doctrine perfected over centuries of conquest. Human defenses collapsed system by system, not because they were incompetent, but because they were ordered to withdraw. Elias clenched his jaw as casualty numbers scrolled past, each figure representing a life abandoned by time. Time for something humanity prayed it would never need. The chamber doors opened without ceremony. Director Amara Voss entered, her expression composed in a way only practiced grief could achieve. She did not offer condolences. She never did. "The Council has authorized activation," she said, her voice steady but stripped of warmth. "You are cleared to assemble your unit." Elias closed his eyes. Authorization meant the line had been crossed. For decades, the veil had existed only as contingency theory, buried under layers of deniability so deep that even Earth's allies doubted its reality. Elias had helped design it after Helio Station, after 12,000 civilians died, while negotiations stalled. He had sworn then that if humanity survived, it would never again wait politely for extinction. "I want full discretion," he said quietly. "No political oversight mid-operation." "You'll have it," Amar replied. "If this fails, oversight won't matter." As Elias left the chamber, memories surfaced unbidden. Training in silence. Years spent learning alien cultures not to destroy them, but to understand where they would break. Operators selected not for aggression, but for restraint under impossible pressure. Mara Chen's laughter during zero-gravity drills. Tomas Ilya's meticulous habit of rewriting mission plans until dawn. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were the last argument humanity ever intended to make. Hours later, Strike Cell 9 assembled in a dim hangar carved into bedrock. No flags hung on the walls. No insignia marked their armor. Each member met Elias's gaze without speaking, already aware that this mission would not be recorded in any official history. Mara stood at his left, her face calm, eyes sharp with unspoken questions. She had lost family in the first wave of the invasion, but grief had sharpened her focus rather than dulled it. "Our objective isn't victory," Elias began, his voice carrying easily in the stillness. "It's interruption. We destabilize command, logistics, belief. If we're seen, we've failed. If we're remembered, we've failed." Tomas allowed himself a thin smile. "And if we succeed?" Elias paused, choosing honesty over reassurance. "Then the galaxy will start asking why the Varkesh are afraid." The insertion window was narrow, the margin for error non-existent. As the team boarded their craft, Elias felt a familiar weight settle over him, not fear but responsibility. Every decision he made would ripple outward, shaping not only the war, but how humanity would be judged if the truth emerged. He wondered, briefly, whether the galaxy would forgive them for surviving. The craft slipped into folded space without sound, carrying them toward enemy territory and a future that could not be undone. Elias watched her vanish in the display, a small blue promise receding into darkness. Whatever happened next, the rumor would no longer be enough. Soon, the galaxy would learn what humanity did when left with no other choice. The Veil entered Varkesh space without announcement, their vessel drifting between patrol routes like a thought never fully formed. Elias watched tactical projections flicker across the cockpit, each symbol representing lives that would never know how close they came to death. He reminded himself that anonymity was their shield and restraint their sharpest weapon. If the Dominion understood who struck them, fear would harden into unity. Their first objective lay within a communications nexus orbiting a mind world, a place where orders became certainty. Mara led the infiltration, her movements fluid, almost reverent, as though she were stepping through a temple rather than an enemy's stronghold. Elias followed, tracking her biosignals, remembering the woman who once joked through danger and now carried silence like armor. She did not hesitate when disabling sentries, but she did not kill unless forced, a choice Elias respected and feared. Inside the core chamber, Tomas worked quickly, his fingers dancing through alien code with practiced intuition. They built this to control obedience, he murmured. Centralized truth, fragile by design. Elias watched as Tomas rewrote hierarchies, severing command chains without triggering alarms. The act felt intimate, almost surgical, and Elias wondered how many wars might have ended differently if power structures were always this exposed. The withdrawal was flawless, yet Elias felt no relief. The data Tomas extracted painted a grim picture. The Varkesh campaign was not conquest alone, but demonstration. They intended to make humanity an example, a lesson to others who might resist assimilation. That understanding tightened something in Elias's chest. This was not a border conflict that could be negotiated away. It was ideology enforced through annihilation. Strike Cell 9 moved again before the Dominion could adapt. Supply convoys vanished into silence. Propaganda hubs flickered, then broadcast images the Varkesh had buried for decades. Enslaved populations, extinguished cultures, broken treaties. Across occupied systems, doubt began to spread like a quiet contagion. Elias listened to intercepted transmissions filled with confusion, fear, and disbelief. The enemy was beginning to fracture, but fractures could still cut. The cost arrived sooner than expected. During an extraction above a refinery moon, a patrol adjusted its route by seconds, collapsing their escape corridor. Alarms screamed. Weapons fire tore through vacuum. Mara pushed a civilian technician towards safety before Elias could stop her, taking the brunt of the blast that followed. The team escaped, but her signal did not follow. Elias refused to leave orbit until confirmation was absolute. Hours later, intelligence feeds confirmed her capture. Varkesh Command declared it proof that the human myth bled like any other. Tomas broke the silence first, his voice hollow. They'll try to make her talk. She won't, Elias said, though doubt gnawed at him. He knew the training. He also knew pain could twist even the strongest will. The council urged caution. Extraction was deemed too risky. Elias listened, then severed the channel. Leadership, he understood now, meant choosing which rules to break. He set a new course, the weight of command settling heavier than any armor. Tomas met his gaze, fear and loyalty warring in his eyes, then nodded once. They reached the detention facility under the cover of a solar storm, chaos masking their approach. Elias moved through corridors thick with the scent of metal and fear, each step echoing with the possibility of failure. He found Mara in a containment field, bloody but conscious, her eyes sharp despite the pain. She looked at him and smiled faintly, as if surprised he had come. The rescue was brutal and brief. Elias carried her as they fled, feeling how light she was, how much had already been taken. As they escaped into the storm, Elias understood that the war had crossed a threshold. The veil was no longer an unseen hand shaping events. It was personal now, and the Dominion had learned that humanity would not abandon its own, no matter the cost. As the vessel slipped back into folded space, Elias stayed beside Mara, monitoring her vitals while the others secured their exit. Her grip tightened around his wrist, grounding him in the moment. "They're afraid now," she whispered. Elias looked toward the dark where Varkesh space receded, understanding that fear could drive surrender or savagery. He did not know which path the Dominion would choose. He only knew that the line between shadow and open war was thinning, and soon humanity would have to decide whether secrecy still served its purpose or whether truth itself would become the next weapon. Elias closed his eyes briefly, committing the choice to memory. Whatever came next would define not just the war, but what kind of power humanity was willing to be seen wielding when silence finally failed. The thought followed him into hyperspace, unresolved, heavy, and impossible to escape entirely yet. The Dominion responded to disruption with brutality, tightening its grip where it felt it slipping. Curfews were enforced, dissenters vanished, and entire cities were punished for rumors of human intervention. Elias watched the report stream in, each image reinforcing the truth that fear, once awakened, sought control through cruelty. He knew the pattern well. Humanity had walked that road before and barely turned back. Mara recovered slowly, her injuries forcing her into the role she hated most, observer. She spent hours analyzing intercepted transmissions, her voice steady even when the content cut close to home. Elias saw how captivity had sharpened her resolve rather than broken it. She spoke less now, but when she did, every word carried intent. Their consolidating power, she said one cycle, eyes fixed on a rotating map of occupied systems. That means they're scared. Scared leaders make mistakes. Tomas confirmed her assessment with data. The Varkesh High Command had centralized authority, pulling decision-making inward to protect it. Supply lines grew rigid. Response time slowed. The Dominion was armoring its heart and exposing its limbs. Elias recognized opportunity, but also risk. Striking too hard could unify their enemy. Holding back could allow atrocities to continue. Balance had become a knife edge. The Council transmitted new directives, their tone urgent and divided. Some factions wanted the Veil withdrawn before escalation became irreversible. Others demanded decisive action to end the war outright. Elias listened, absorbing every argument, then muted the channel. Strategy mattered, but so did conscience. He could not unsee the occupied worlds burning quietly, while politicians weighed optics. Strike Cell 9 moved again, this time targeting a logistics hub critical to the Dominion's frontier fleets. The insertion was messier than before. Patrols doubled. Countermeasures adapted. The enemy was learning, and that knowledge pressed against Elias's patience. During the operation, Tomas narrowly avoided detection, his usual precision strained by exhaustion. Elias noticed, filed it away, and adjusted roles without comment. Leadership meant protecting the team even from their own limits. They succeeded. But the aftermath carried consequences. A Varkesh transmission pierced their secure channels, broadcast deliberately on an open frequency. A Dominion commander addressed humanity directly, his voice trembling with fury and something like awe. He spoke of shadows that undermined order, of humans who refused to fight honorably. Then the screen shifted to a group of captives, hands bound, fear unmistakable. "If you wish to remain unseen," the commander said, "you will abandon them." Silence filled the cockpit. Elias felt it settle into his bones. The message was clear: withdraw and preserve secrecy, or intervene and confirm the myth. Mara's gaze met his, unwavering despite her injuries. Tomas swallowed hard, fingers hovering uselessly above his console. This was the choice the Veil had been designed to delay, not escape. Elias weighed the options with ruthless clarity. Rescue would expose them. Exposure could invite coalition retaliation, even from those who secretly benefited from Varkesh collapse. But abandoning the captives would shatter everything the Veil claimed to protect. He thought of Helio Station, of waiting while lives were tallied like resources. He would not repeat that failure. "We're going in," he said. The rescue unfolded under fire and scrutiny. Dominion forces anticipated their approach, forcing Elias to abandon subtlety for speed. Weapons flared. Systems screamed. They fought through resistance that refused to break, driven by desperation and pride. Elias moved with lethal efficiency, every strike measured, every decision final. When they reached the captives, fear gave way to disbelief, then fragile hope. They escaped with seconds to spare, their vessel scarred and visible on every sensor in the sector. As they vanished into folded space, Elias knew the truth could no longer be contained. The galaxy had seen enough to believe. Back aboard, the rescued prisoners huddled together, alive because someone chose them over secrecy. Elias felt no triumph, only resolve. The war had changed shape, and with it, humanity's role. Shadows had served their purpose, but the light was coming whether he welcomed it or not. As he stared into the dark ahead, Elias understood that the next move would not be about fear alone, but about what kind of example humanity would set when hiding was no longer possible. The galaxy reacted as Elias expected and feared, with panic disguised as outrage. Governments demanded explanations. Alliances fractured, and commentators argued whether humanity had revealed a shield or a sword. The Dominion seized a moment, framing the rescues as proof of human aggression. Yet their own systems trembled under internal dissent. Fear spread faster than truth, and Elias knew perception now mattered as much as action. Strike Cell 9 received fragmented intelligence from across the spiral, confirming what Tomas predicted. Varkesh commanders were abandoning restraint, preparing a singular demonstration of force meant to end resistance everywhere at once. The weapon was ancient, barely understood, and catastrophic by design, capable of destabilizing stellar cores. Elias felt the weight of inevitability settle over him as coordinates resolved into something heartbreakingly familiar. So, Mara stood beside him when the data finished compiling, her expression unreadable. "They want to make an example," she said quietly. "Not just of Earth, of defiance itself." Elias nodded, feeling anger coil beneath discipline. Humanity had been underestimated, cornered, and now threatened with erasure simply for surviving. He opened a channel to the Council, already knowing debate would be brief. Authorization came with conditions, each one a compromise Elias despised. The Veil could act, but only to stop the weapon, not dismantle the Dominion. No retaliation, no declaration. Humanity still hoped to remain misunderstood rather than feared. Elias accepted the terms, not because he agreed, but because delay would cost everything. The insertion was the most dangerous operation they had attempted. The Starbreaker array was surrounded by overlapping defenses designed by species long extinct. Its systems layered with redundancies meant to defy logic. Tomas worked beyond exhaustion, rewriting alien physics into something briefly negotiable. Mara provided overwatch, her movements precise despite lingering pain, every shot a refusal to let the past define her limits. Inside the core, Elias felt the hum of contained annihilation beneath his boots. This was power stripped of conscience, a relic of civilizations that chose dominance over survival. He planted the final sequence, disabling the array without triggering collapse, then paused. One command remained, a failsafe that could erase the entire installation and everyone on it. He left it untouched. They escaped seconds before Dominion forces sealed the sector. The array went dark across every monitor in the galaxy. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Then transmissions erupted, confusion giving way to realization. Humanity had reached the heart of its enemy and chosen restraint again. The Dominion fractured openly. Fleets defected. Worlds declared neutrality. Yet one final threat remained, a coalition of hardliners launching a desperate assault toward Earth with nothing left to lose. Elias gathered his team, reading the exhaustion etched in the faces he trusted with his life. "This ends now," he said, not as an order, but a promise. The confrontation was swift and merciless. The Veil intercepted the Armada before it could scatter, disabling vessels with precision that left no room for martyrdom. Elias commanded without hesitation, every decision informed by the lives at stake on both sides. When the last enemy ship powered down, surrender codes flooding open channels, he exhaled for the first time in days. Afterward, humanity broke its silence. Archives were opened, history shared, scars exposed. Elias watched reactions ripple outward, shock giving way to reluctant understanding. The galaxy saw not monsters, but survivors who learned too well what unchecked power could do. As the dust settled, Elias understood the war was over, but the reckoning was just beginning, and the future would demand a different kind of courage from them all. He remained at the viewport, watching distant stars drift as systems recalibrated around them. Victory felt muted, almost fragile, because it had been purchased with secrets and restraint rather than triumph. Mara joined him, her posture steadier now. Those shadows lingered behind her eyes. "They'll remember this," she said. Elias considered the weight of memory, how it shaped enemies and allies alike. He wondered whether fear would fade into respect or curdle into something more dangerous. Tomas interrupted quietly, confirming multiple governments were requesting dialogue, not demands. It was a shift, subtle but undeniable. Humanity was no longer an enigma to be ignored. Elias straightened, knowing the path ahead would require transparency equal to strength. Wars could end, but trust took longer to build. As he turned to the stars, He felt the familiar burden settle again, not of command, but of example. The next chapter would not be fought in shadows alone. It would unfold in full view, where every choice echoed beyond battlefields. Elias accepted that truth without flinching, understanding that the galaxy was watching, learning, and waiting to see whether humanity would remain disciplined when no longer hidden. He inhaled, steadying himself, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever judgment followed next. Now mattered. Peace arrived without celebration, settling instead like ash after a long fire. The Dominion formally dissolved, its surviving leaders agreeing to disarm under supervision rather than face annihilation. Across liberated systems, silence replaced alarms, and people emerged cautiously, unsure whether hope was safe again. Elias watched these moments from orbit, aware that victory measured in survival felt heavier than triumph ever could. The veil was deactivated within days. Orders arrived stripped of ceremony, thanking operators for service that officially never occurred. Elias read the message once, then archived it without comment. He felt no bitterness, only a quiet exhaustion that seeped into his bones. Shadows were meant to fade, and perhaps that was their final duty. Mara recovered fully, though the scars remained, mapped carefully along her skin and memory alike. She chose not to return command, instead dedicating herself to reconstruction efforts among former Varkesh territories. Elias watched her departure with a mix of pride and regret, knowing she carried empathy forged in suffering that those worlds desperately needed. They promised to meet again, though both understood promises changed shape after war. Tomas stayed. He always did. Together they helped dismantle the last remnants of the Veil, ensuring no faction could repurpose its methods without the restraint that defined it. Tomas spoke once, late into the work, about fear that humanity might forget why secrecy had existed. Elias shared that fear, but believed remembrance was now a shared responsibility. Diplomatic envoys arrived from across the galaxy, no longer demanding, but asking. Humanity answered with transparency that bordered on vulnerability, revealing failures alongside strengths. Elias stood before assemblies not as a hero, but as a witness, describing the cost of hesitation and the discipline required to choose mercy. Some listened, others recoiled. Change, he learned, moved unevenly. Earth reopened its skies to civilian traffic, the familiar blue world welcoming travelers who once feared it. Elias returned planetside quietly, walking streets rebuilt from past conflicts, surrounded by ordinary lives continuing despite everything. He felt detached, yet anchored, understanding that anonymity was a privilege earned through sacrifice. For the first time in years, he slept without alarms. Still, the future pressed close. New alliances formed cautiously, testing trust like unfamiliar gravity. Rumors persisted, reshaped now into cautionary tales told in academies and council chambers. Humans were no longer underestimated, but neither were they mythologized as monsters. They occupied an uneasy middle ground, respected because restraint had been witnessed, not merely claimed. Elias received one final message months later, encrypted but familiar. Mara had written from a border world, describing children learning without fear, former enemies sharing resources, fragile peace taking root. She thanked him not for saving her life, but for believing some lives were worth risking everything for. Elias read the message twice, then smiled. He stood again beneath open sky, watching stars emerge as night settled. Humanity's greatest weapon, he reflected, had never been secrecy or strength alone, but the willingness to be accountable for power. The galaxy had hoped their special forces were a myth. Perhaps, in time, they could become one again, replaced by trust rather than necessity. Elias turned away from the stars, stepping back into the world he had helped preserve, knowing stories like this endured only if remembered, shared, and questioned by those who came next. The end, he understood, was not silence but vigilance. Elias remained where he was, letting the quiet stretch, considering how easily peace could erode without care. He knew future leaders would study this war, extracting lessons that suited their ambitions, not always their ethics. That knowledge troubled him more than any enemy ever had. Power invited interpretation, and interpretation could excuse cruelty if left unchallenged. He resolved then to speak when silence tempted him, to remind others what restraint had cost, not as a commander, but as a citizen shaped by consequences. Humanity's strength, he believed, lay not in hidden blades, but in shared memory. As long as people remember why the Veil existed, they might never need to rebuild it. Above him, transports crossed the sky, carrying diplomats, workers, and families toward uncertain futures. Life continued, imperfect and resilient. Elias allowed himself a final moment of stillness before turning toward the city lights, ready to live within the peace he had helped secure. Knowing vigilance began with ordinary choices made every day. He accepted that no ending was permanent, only pauses between trials. The galaxy would test humanity again, and humanity would test itself. Whether they answer with fear or wisdom remained uncertain. Elias chose to believe choice still mattered. With that belief, he stepped forward, not as a shadow or symbol, but as a man accountable tomorrow. The story would endure only if others carried it onward, shaping futures with conscience, courage, memory, humility intact.